You've been accepted to the college of your choice, and now you're preparing to head off to school. I recently saw a Facebook post by a parent concerned about transportation for their off campus student, which brings us to motorcycles. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the channel. Congratulations on your acceptance. I will give you a hearty well done, and you give me a like and subscribe. Right? Yeah, well, it was worth a try. Now, this may not seem like it's a motorcycle topic to everyone, but for some of us, every topic leads to motorcycles. Seriously though, by the end of this video, you should understand why it actually is a motorcycle topic. And while I welcome those just accepted to college, this segment may actually be more relevant to those completing their first year. I'll be using the University of Georgia as the basis for my comments because, well, that's where I have the most familiarity. Between my years at the school and my son's experiences now, yeah, that's what I know. But I've looked at other major universities like University of Alabama, Ohio State, places like that. I found that many large universities, if not most, are fairly similar with their transportation, which means the model at UGA is also valid for other places. Your homework is to do your own research about the school you'll be attending and figure out their transportation options. First, we'll cover transportation for incoming freshmen. At the University of Georgia, all freshmen are required to live on campus, in dorms, unless they live close enough to commute. Then they can opt out, which puts them more in the same situation as the off-campus commuters, which we'll address them later. Because 99.9% of freshmen have to live in dorms, they have priority for dorm space. Looking at this picture, you can see where the dorms are located with regard to the UGA campus and classroom buildings. Some are very close, while others are a little more distant. Of course, all of them are connected to campus using the campus bus system. This map gives a comprehensive list of all the housing locations, and well, hold on a sec. Let me circle the part that's what most people would consider the main campus. There we are. There are certainly buildings outside of this ring that would be considered classroom areas, but this is where the bulk of the classes will be, especially for freshmen and sophomores. Notice anything interesting? Yeah, look at those blue dormitory dots down at the bottom of the screen. Those are kind of far away. Let me assure you, those are not what I would consider to be walking distance. Now, here's a partial list of the campus bus stops. The reason it's a partial list is because the bus stops within that purple circle are so numerous that it'd just be a jumble of dots. Trust me when I say within the main campus area, there are bus stops all over the place. If you're living in a dorm, you can get around campus pretty well using the bus system. And you can always supplement with maybe a bicycle, scooter, skateboard, or some combination of those. In other words, you don't really need a car to get around campus. I would go so far as to say that you can't even use a car to get around campus because there's nowhere for you to park on campus. Using a car to get from your dorm into town or something is legit, but not just to get around campus. Even getting to town, you can use your student ID to ride the Athens City Transit System buses, which that system links up with the campus system. A parking permit at UGA is assigned to one lot, and one lot only. For those in dorms, it will probably be at your dorm. You won't be able to move your car anywhere else on campus during class hours, which makes it rather ironic to me that freshmen are given priority for car permits. I mean, if you're a freshman, your main need for a car is to get to and from school from home. Once you're in Athens, your need for an automobile is greatly reduced if you're living in a dorm. When I was a freshman living in a dorm, about the only lot we could park in was at the other side of the Coliseum because we were at the absolute bottom of the priority list, and the Coliseum lot was one of the worst parking spaces and the furthest away. But today, freshmen get priority parking. Go figure. Academia. Before I go any farther, I want to make some clarifications of terms I'll be using during the rest of this video. This is a scooter. This is an electric scooter. And this is a motor scooter. When referring to an electric scooter, I'm referring to this, not this. Now, I'm grouping all motor scooters together regardless of engine displacement or whether they're gas or electric. So even though you're not required to have a license for a scooter under 50 cc's in the state of Georgia, I will still be including them in my motor scooter descriptions. If there's ever a difference between an under 50 cc motor scooter as opposed to an over 50 cc machine, I'll specifically note it. That means that while you're living in a dorm, you may want one of these, or even one of these. But you probably won't need one of these, unless you're maybe down at one of those dots at the bottom of the map. Another point of clarification is a skateboard. This is an electric skateboard, or longboard. I will only use the term longboard to refer to electric skateboards, although I am aware there are longboards that are not electric. And when I was in school, there was no such thing as an electric skateboard, but regular skateboards were very popular. I never really understood the attraction because, in my opinion, they were very limited given the hills on campus. But anyway, my son had an electric longboard his freshman year on campus and worked out very well for him. Bicycles are certainly popular, and e-bikes are certainly easier given the hills around. For those in a dorm, bicycles can make a lot of sense. There are bike racks all over campus. Here's a map showing their locations. I doubt there's a building on campus that doesn't have a rack pretty close by. There's a web page for micromobility users, which includes all electric rides, such as scooters, hoverboards, skateboards, and so forth. I'll put the link in the description. According to the page, these electric vehicles are not allowed on buses. Right? In case there's any question, bicycles, e-scooters, electric bikes, and hoverboards cannot be used on sidewalks. Sidewalks and crosswalks are for pedestrian use. Those devices are also not allowed inside campus buildings. They have to be parked in designated bike rack areas outside the building. So if you're trying to decide on a particular mode of transportation using one of those micromobility electric devices, I would choose one while keeping in mind they'll need to be secured to a bike rack or something. One final piece for the wheeled personal vehicles, which UGA defines as bicycles, skateboards, scooters, and electric micromobility devices. Here's a map of the campus dismount zone. What is a campus dismount zone? This is an area where none of those wheeled personal vehicles may be used on walkways Monday through Friday 8 to 5. Note that they can be used on the streets. In fact, Georgia law requires that all micromobility users ride on roads or in bike lanes. You can see there are roads in that dismount zone. You just need to dismount to get from the road to the bike rack. Once you complete your freshman year, chances are you'll be moving out of the dorms and into some other living situation. For this discussion, I'm going to ignore those who decide to remain in dorms, as well as those who may live on campus or are campus adjacent. For example, downtown condominiums, apartments, stuff like that. Here's a map of Athens. To make this a little easier for you to see, let's put our purple ring up again. You see all that area outside that ring? Those are all the other places you could live. Notice there's a lot more outside of the ring than inside, especially considering a lot of what's inside the ring is classroom buildings. Even those living in their fraternity or sorority houses, which are most of them campus adjacent. They're still outside the ring. They may find they won't be there for all the years they're in school. In some cases, residents are only allowed to live in the house for 1 year. Space is at a premium. As for apartments, condominiums, houses for rent, well, they're like real estate anywhere. The closer you are to campus, the more expensive the living arrangements. Thus, just like buying a house, you keep moving your ring farther and farther from the center of campus until you finally get to the housing your parents feel they can afford. Because anyone living close to campus can utilize a lot of the same transportation options they were using while in the dorms, I'm not covering them. For example, downtown Athens is literally right across the street from the arches at the north end of campus. So having an apartment or condominium in the downtown area doesn't require new transportation decisions. On the other hand, if you live a few miles away, you're going to need some sort of transportation that was not needed when you were in the dorm. As I pointed out in my earliest videos, one of the most dangerous things I've ever done in my life was the year I lived relatively close to campus and rode a bicycle through the streets of Athens to get to class. Very convenient, but also quite dangerous, as the hills and narrow streets are anything but bike friendly. And no, there are no bike lanes. And you're sharing them with buses and inattentive student drivers. What are your transportation options when you live off campus? Well, the most obvious answer is drive your car. Of course, that assumes you get a car parking permit. We'll come back to that in a minute. Less obvious choices are to walk or drive to a city transit bus stop or park and ride, catch a bus to campus, transfer from the city bus to the campus bus, take that bus to the campus bus stop closest to your class, get off and walk from there to class. That's assuming you don't have to transfer from one campus bus to a different campus bus because the one coming from the city bus stop doesn't get close to your classroom. If you're getting something like a skateboard or a scooter, if it folds up enough, you might be able to take it on that city bus with you and then use it once you get to campus. Both UGA and the city of Athens are starting to equip their buses with bicycle racks, which means that could be a viable alternative for someone who has a bicycle. A reminder that the electric versions of these are not allowed on the buses. If you don't get a parking permit, there are some businesses, campus or adjacent to campus, such as like gas stations and stuff, which have some parking places they rent out by the semester. Even if you get a car parking permit, there is no guarantee it'll be convenient. Take a look at this map of the commuter parking for UGA. If you get a parking permit, that permit is for one specific parking lot. In other words, if you look on this map, you can see the yellow parking area NO2 at the top of the map, and then another yellow parking lot about 2/3 of the way down the map, which is EO7. If you're assigned to one of these, you can't park in the other one, period. The color coding only indicates the price range for the lot. It doesn't mean it's a yellow parking permit and you can park in any yellow lot. If your lot is NO2 at the top of the page and your class is E20 in the middle of the page, you're just going to have to walk. And take a look at the stadium about a quarter of the way down the page. That should give you some indication of the scale we're talking about. Using my son and his friends as examples, out of the eight of them, only one of them was able to get a parking permit during his sophomore year. And the only reason he got one was because his classes were at an unusual location that was farther away from the central campus, which meant that the parking lot was not in high demand. He parks in the lot towards the bottom of the page that's listed as E21. Remember, the southern edge of the main campus is around EO4. As for the others, only one of them got a parking permit this year, and in EO1, also at the bottom of the map at the intramural fields. That's really too far away from the campus for a skateboard or scooter, in my opinion. The electric versions might be a better choice. It's essentially a campus run park and ride. He parks at the intramural fields, goes over to the bus stop, waits for the appropriate campus bus, rides it to the closest bus stop to his classes, gets off, and walks the rest of the way. As I said, it's very similar to the city park and ride, except you don't have to transfer from a city transport bus to the campus bus. Although you may still have to transfer to another campus bus if the one servicing your parking lot doesn't go near your classroom building. Confused yet? Now, take a look at this map. You see all those red scooters all over the map? That's motorcycle and motor scooter parking. They're everywhere, and they're all through Central Campus. There's no dismount zone, and you're not assigned to one lot. If you have a motorcycle parking permit, you can park in any of those areas. That means my son is able to take his motorcycle and typically park within a block to a block and a half from wherever his class is. And when he gets out of class, he can walk back to the motorcycle, ride it across campus, and park in another motorcycle parking lot to go to the library, student center, another class, whatever. And according to my discussion with the folks in the parking offices, they've never hit their maximum number of motorcycle/motor scooter parking permits. They weren't even sure there was a maximum because they'd never hit one. Might not hurt for me to point out that you can also use the motorcycle parking on game days. Just saying. Most of the other parking, you have to move your car out of the lot in order to allow all the alumni to come in and use your parking lot. It's possible for you to have both a car parking permit and a motorcycle parking permit. Neither of them has any impact upon the other. In other words, if you get a motorcycle permit, it doesn't push you farther down on the car permit priority list. The two are considered completely separately. Now remember, my son's a junior and still hasn't qualified for a car parking permit, but he's had a motorcycle parking permit for the last 2 years. Around campus isn't the only place a motorcycle is convenient. It also helps around town. Downtown Athens is a parking meter hell. It's angled or parallel parking with meters, or a parking garage. At any rate, if you don't feed the meter, you will most assuredly get a ticket. They're serious about that stuff. But guess what? There are motorcycle parking spaces right next to the metered car spaces for free. Yes, you can ride your motorcycle downtown and skip the parking fee. Just park it in a free motorcycle parking space. And a lot of businesses have places where there's always room for your bike, even when the car lot is full. I asked my son over this Christmas break how much he really uses the motorcycle compared to using his car. He lives about 3 miles from campus, and he said he probably uses the motorcycle 90% of the time. In other words, about the only time he does not use the motorcycle is, for instance, where he has to go to the grocery store and get something, for instance, or possibly in severe inclement weather where he's going to a friend's house across town, one evening or something. During the time he's had the bike at school, which is almost 2 years now, he's put over 1,500 miles on that bike. Remember, I said he lives 3 miles from campus, so he's riding a lot more than just going back and forth to campus a few times a day. Okay, I don't want to make it sound all sugar plums and roses. I have more videos in the series for parents addressing various concerns about motorcycles and motor scooters. This video is only making the case of why a motorcycle or motor scooter makes the most sense for commuting to campus. My son and his friends all acknowledge that riding a motorcycle to campus is almost always the most convenient way to commute. Pretty much all his friends wish they rode, but are blocked by their parents. Hence, this video to help both you and your parents understand the need. There will be a follow-up in this series to give parents a more complete picture of the situation and to discuss their legitimate parental concerns. But for now, be sure to like and subscribe so you get the rest of my college transportation series. Thanks for stopping by. And until next time, so long.